Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're anything like me, you probably loved a good game of hide and seek as a kid. It's all fun and games, right? But what if I told you that sometimes this innocent game can take a truly chilling turn? Today, we're diving deep into 3 real-life accounts that turned a childhood classic into a terrifying nightmare. These aren't just stories, these are experiences that left people questioning what lurks in the shadows. So, dim the lights, get cozy, and prepare to be spooked, because these tales will make you think twice before you ever play hide and seek again. Our first story is called The Shadow in the Attic. It's a chilling account from a Reddit user about a childhood game that went horribly wrong. Imagine being a kid full of energy, playing hide and seek in your grandparents' old creaky house. This house had an attic, one of those places you always knew was there but rarely ventured into. It was dusty, full of forgotten treasures, and naturally, the perfect spot to hide. Our storyteller, let's call him Alex, decided this was his winning move. He snuck up the narrow stairs, pushed open the heavy attic door, and found a perfect spot behind an old trunk. The dust motes danced in the single shaft of light filtering through a tiny window. He held his breath, listening for footsteps. But what he heard next wasn't his cousin calling out, "Ready or not, here I come." It was a soft, ragged breathing coming from deeper in the shadows, accompanied by a faint rhythmic scratching sound. Alex froze, his heart pounding in his ears. He told himself it was just the house settling, or maybe a mouse. But then, a distinct silhouette detached itself from the darkest corner of the attic. It was tall, impossibly thin, and seemed to glide rather than walk. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and Alex felt an icy dread crawl up his spine. He couldn't make out any features, just the dark outline against the slightly less dark background. He squeezed his eyes shut, wishing he could disappear. When he dared to open them again, the figure was closer, still breathing that ragged, shallow breath. A whisper, dry and raspy, seemed to brush past his ear, though the figure hadn't moved its head. He couldn't understand the words, but the malice in the sound was undeniable. Alex didn't wait to be found. He scrambled out from behind the trunk, tumbled down the attic stairs, and didn't stop running until he was outside, gasping for air. His cousins found him crying uncontrollably, unable to explain what he'd seen. To this day, he refuses to go into attics, and the memory of that shadow still haunts his nightmares. Alright, take a deep breath. Our next chilling tale is titled The Unseen Player. This one comes from a small town in rural America. A story passed down through generations, often whispered around campfires. It involves a group of friends playing hide and seek in a sprawling, overgrown field that bordered an old abandoned farmstead. The sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows, perfect for a challenging game. There were 5 kids, and the seeker was counting. The other 4 scattered, laughing, eager to find the best hiding spots. One of them, a girl named Sarah, decided to hide in the decaying barn on the farmstead property. It was dark, cobweb-filled, and smelled of damp earth and decay, but she was determined to win. She squeezed behind a stack of hay bales, peering out through a crack, waiting for the all clear. Minutes passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, but also plunging the barn into near total darkness. Sarah started to get a little nervous. She heard her friends calling out each other's names, but no one was calling hers, and no one had found her yet. Then she heard a soft, rhythmic humming. It wasn't one of her friends. The tune was old, melancholy, and oddly unsettling. It seemed to drift from deeper within the barn, from a section she hadn't noticed before, beyond a collapsed wall. Curiosity mixed with a growing sense of dread compelled her to peek. Through the gap in the hay, she saw a faint, flickering light. It wasn't a flashlight. It was too soft, too yellow. And then she saw a figure. It was small, hunched, and seemed to be rocking back and forth. It wasn't one of her friends. This figure wore clothes that looked ancient, almost like rags, and its back was to her. As the humming continued, Sarah felt an overwhelming urge to run, but she was frozen in place. Then, the figure stopped humming, slowly, deliberately, began to turn its head. Sarah could only see the dark outline of its head, but she felt eyes on her, a chilling gaze piercing the darkness. A tiny, almost imperceptible whisper reached her ears. "Found you." That was all she needed to hear. She bolted out of the barn, screaming, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her friends found her hysterical, unable to explain anything coherently. They searched the barn later with flashlights, but found nothing. No small figure, no ancient rags, no source for the humming. To this day, the locals warn children away from that old farmstead, believing that sometimes during a game of hide-and-seek, an extra player might join in, one you never invited. Alright, are you still with me? Let's plunge into our final and perhaps most disturbing story. The game that never ended. This terrifying account comes from a family living in an old Victorian house with a dark history, a story shared by a user on a paranormal forum. The house itself was a character full of secret passages, forgotten rooms, and a labyrinthine layout perfect for hide-and-seek. The family, a mother, father, and 2 young children, Emily and Josh, loved playing the game in their sprawling home. One evening, during a particularly enthusiastic game, Emily was counting, and Josh, being the adventurous one, decided to try a new hiding spot. He mentioned to his sister that he was going to try and find the secret room behind the bookcase, the one they'd always joked about but never actually found. Emily finished counting, called out, "Ready or not, here I come," and began her search. She found her parents fairly quickly, but Josh was nowhere to be found. They searched the entire house, every room, every closet, under every bed. They called his name, over and over, their initial amusement turning into confusion, then worry, and finally panic. Hours passed. The police were called. A full-scale search of the house and surrounding property yielded nothing. It was as if Josh had simply vanished into thin air. There were no open windows, no unlocked doors, no signs of forced entry. Just an empty house and a missing child. The family was devastated. The house, once filled with laughter, became a tomb of silence and sorrow. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and still no trace of Josh. Then, exactly 1 year to the day of his disappearance, Emily was playing alone in the living room, a shell of her former self. She noticed a faint draft coming from behind the large antique bookcase. Remembering Josh's last words, her heart leaped. With her parents' help, they painstakingly moved the heavy bookcase. Behind it, not a secret room, but a barely visible narrow crack in the wall, leading into what looked like a forgotten crawl space. Inside, they found a small, dusty alcove. Then there, curled up in the fetal position, was Josh. He was skeletal, barely alive, his clothes tattered. But what truly horrified them was his expression. Blank, terrified, and distant. He was rushed to the hospital, and after weeks of recovery, he finally began to speak. He recounted a horrifying tale of finding the alcove, crawling in, and getting stuck. But he also spoke of the other player. He said that someone, or something, was always in there with him, whispering his name, playing games with his mind, telling him he could never leave. He swore he heard his family calling him, but every time he tried to call back, a cold hand would clamp over his mouth. He claimed the entity in the alcove would laugh, a dry, rattling sound whenever he tried to escape, telling him the game wasn't over, that he had to stay hidden. To this day, Josh is deeply traumatized, barely speaking about his ordeal. The family moved out of the house, unable to bear the weight of what happened there. They believe Josh stumbled into a game of hide-and-seek with something ancient and malevolent, something that had been waiting in that forgotten space for a very long time. And that's where our journey into these chilling hide-and-seek stories ends today. Pretty spooky, right? It just goes to show you, sometimes the simplest games can hold the darkest secrets. Always be careful what you play with and where you choose to hide. Thank you so much for watching, and for bravely sticking through these tales with me. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more creepy stories, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the unknown. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had a scary hide-and-seek experience? Till next time, stay safe, and try not to look under your bed tonight.